I'm gonna have to piece that together. Yes, so poor parents are at home, they're at work trying to survive. And that's why they're not reading. There's not another reason. That's the reason. If they didn't have to go away to earn a low wage, they could actually be at home with their children reading to them. So some things are a little bit funny. Like, to hear a lot of conversations around like high value men in the Black community, to hear people critiquing good mothers and bad mothers, and in the Black community, and really in communities of color right now, there's this idea of like a wife and a street person. Like, someone who lives on the streets is a person who lives on the streets. People who have apartments, if they're poor, if they're not poor, if they're cheap apartments or wealthy apartments, those people are not on the streets. So that we have to make that distinction. I don't even know why that's necessary to say, but clearly it is. There's a whole other thing around, oh my gosh, like sexual politics and the way that people are choosing to hook up or not, or their purity cards or not, or their marriage and infidelity or not. It's just, those are topics that I am not referring to here. Let's just talk about poor parents for a moment. So this is one of the reasons why it doesn't necessarily make sense to talk about like marriage for poor people. It's illogical. It's not doing anything. Like, you don't have any assets to protect. And marriage in America is simply about the distribution of assets and certain like tax privileges. If you don't have any money or resources, what is it that you're protecting? If what you're doing is trying to go out to other people to share that you are in a monogamous relationship, maybe you should get a sticker or a tattoo or something, but it's not doing what you think it's doing to most of us in society who have like resources and assets. Like, you promoting your monogamy to us isn't like, how do you say it? It's not meaningful. As in, like, most people are not in some race to get into a relationship with your poor spouse. Does that make sense? Now, the reason that this is important in terms of literacy is because two poor people who have a child aren't going to necessarily be in the best position to help that poor child become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, really anything of, how do you say, a high earning person in society, because they don't have the skills to transfer that information to their kid because they never did it. And most likely they're not around other people who are doing it, and they don't know how it looks or feels or how to do it. Whereas like other people who have done it themselves or are surrounded by it or hyper surrounded by it or are literally living the life themselves, it's like most kids of doctors are in a better position to become doctors, right? Anyway, so what I'm saying is, if there are two lower income people who are not able to give the time in terms of reading at home, doing homework with the student, providing tutors, going through the process of developing strong comprehension and literacy skills, that student isn't going to gain them out of the sky. Either the parents are going to give it to them or they're not going to have it. And in order for those students to succeed in society, they need those skills. So, like, where are they going to get them? Who's going to give them to that student? this is what I'm talking about. It's the cost of actually having a child. It isn't just about money, it's also about time. Having a home husband or a housewife is a privilege for a number of reasons, not just the domestic work, but also being able to provide tutoring to a student, and all students need this. Now, most white children are growing up in households, not all, but I would say about 60% of white children are growing up in households where they receive this because their mothers, once they get off of work, are able to provide it, or they have a tutor. There's some sort of way where there's some person who's at home who's able to give those students the additional time and care and nurturing that's necessary for that student to thrive academically, whereas a lot of Black and brown children are being placed in front of a television and expected to learn about the world and society and themselves without the guidance of an adult. The guidance of an adult is critical. It is required for human growth. Now, this is where some things about representation become problematic, right? Because you have so many images of Black destitution that most of the youth in America for so long have had visual representations of Black poverty and Black destitution and Black drug use and all of these images that they're not on television. They're out in the real world. It's like, that's John with a crack needle in his arm, and he's a Black male, and he's sitting right here on the street right now, and we all know him, and we walk past him every night. And now the 5-year-old white kid who walks past John every day also knows John and has this mental image in his mind that this is how Black men are. Or, Ann Coulter wrote the blog the other day that was talking about the fact that, it's like a very small percentage of the Black community is committing a very high percentage of crime in large cities. Like in New York, it's like 3% or something of the Black community is committing like 70% of the crime in New York. That's most of the crime. That's really bad, and it's not really reflective of everyone in the Black community, not even most people. It's only 3% of the Black population. But in terms of that representation for other groups, it's like the Black people are committing the crime. We see them. Here they are. This is what is happening. That's hard, but that's kind of the reality. And I feel like in a lot of those cases, it is the responsibility of other Black males, if they care about their own image and their own group, really, because whether they choose to acknowledge it or not, they are a part of that group. They should try to support those males and integrate them back into society in some way so that they're not harming the other people who are here, though that's not happening, which I feel like is another reason so many Black women have been advocating for overall mental health care for all Black people. But I feel like Black women are actually getting some of that care, and for whatever reason, some Black males are not, and it's Black males who actually need it, because I feel like it's those Black males who are committing crime. There are a small percentage of Black females who are committing that crime too, but criminality is clearly an issue that we need to talk about in the Black community. And one of the reasons that so many people from the Black community resort to crime is due to illiteracy. Like, if you are unable to strive academically and all of the jobs in society require you to have a certain level of comprehension, and you don't have it, how can you get any job at all? How? I don't know. I don't have an answer for this, Like, I wonder. don't know. So the challenge here then becomes, how can autonomous students, so these are students who are poor, use public resources to educate themselves because their parents can't do it. Now, this is where the promise of the public library becomes not just a resource, but like a critical pillar, a critical equalizing pillar in the community. Now, poor white children have, and even middle class white children and Asian families as well, and even I would say upper class black families also use the library. Everyone who kind of doesn't need the library is using it, but the people who do need it the most seem to be sort of forgetting what it is and how to use it. Like, the public library is open the hours that school and after school programs are closed until about like 8 or 9 o'clock. So like, even if your parent worked pretty late into the night, you could still just go to the library every day and do your homework. And there are tutors at the library. So if you had questions about homework and you didn't understand how to do it, it's like a safe space with a desk and a bathroom. And sometimes now they even provide like snacks. So why is it that you couldn't just go to the library every day where there's like a computer, many computers actually, tutors, to just look things up and get your homework done and prepare really for your future, whatever that means. I don't know, right? Like, why not do that? I'm just saying, if I was a poor kid, that's what I would do. I mean, personally, I don't know. I never had that issue. I was in after school programs, and so I would do my homework there. Or if I didn't get it done there, I would go home. And I mean, I had a brother who blasted loud music sometimes, but then my mom would make him shut it down. So, you know, I don't know. I would just go into my room and do my homework. And if I had questions about it, I'd go talk to my teachers after school. So I feel like I was getting the support that I needed. I guess it's a little bit difficult because comprehension is a skill that takes some time to develop. Like, if you start at a very low reading level, you're not going to get up to speed overnight. It's going to take time, and you're going to have to invest that time, and it's going to be a struggle. Learning to read, like anything else, is very difficult. It's very difficult. I don't know, a lot of people don't talk about how challenging it is. So why doesn't anyone talk about this in the Black community? In the Latino community? I would just say this. I think it's because of opportunity hoarding. As in, people who find themselves to be a part of those groups realize that there are a lot of poor people in those groups, and they want to identify who those poor people are, and they don't want those poor people to have opportunities, even though it's like a God-given right there are poverty programs that are in place to help those students succeed. But if those students succeed, then the wealthy students have kind of like less easy opportunity because they have to compete. If two students are applying to Harvard and neither of them are legacy admits, the poor student is going to get this. If the grades are the same and all other things are equal, the poor student is getting the slot. Because they check more marginalized boxes. So maybe the issue is actually, how do more poor students understand, first of all, that they are poor? I feel like that's something that's very strange, and especially in poor communities, everyone wants to be a princess. It's just like the purity coins that are being trotted to poor girls specifically. It's like, everyone's not going to marry rich, and even wealthy men are going to marry people in very similar socioeconomic classes. For those reasons specifically, they want their kids to grow up the same way they grew up. It's like, the things that made me successful, I'm going to transmit that information off to my kids. This is another reason why I just refuse to partner with most people. Or even, I don't consider myself to have dated really almost anyone. Like, hooking up with people, okay. Like, going out with people, okay. But being in a relationship with someone and actually making commitments is very different, because like, I know the way that I grew up, and I am very familiar with the amount of privilege that I have. And if you did not that much research, you could probably figure out how many opportunities I've gotten and how many ways I have thrived. Maybe, you know, if you only watch this YouTube channel, you might only be familiar with ways that I have failed. But I've been successful at least as often as I've been unsuccessful. So that's about, it's like 50% of the time I've been successful, and 50% of the time I've not been successful. And I'll leave it up to your own discretion to determine whether at this point in my life I'm successful or not. I personally feel like at this point in my life, I'm content. Like, I'm self-supporting, I am autonomous. I feel like the people who I've chosen to remain in relationship with have been there with me through some extremely rough times, and I'm so grateful for them. I'm so grateful for them. And the work that I plan to do in the developing world in the future, I really feel like it will create systems of change, and it will create opportunities for girls who look like me that they never knew were possible and they didn't know existed. I just wish that more women, poor Black women, and I do feel like it's starting to happen, but I wish it was, I wish there were more, stories of poor Black American women who realized the opportunity that they have now. Not like in the past or, someone else, but for themselves now. What are the opportunities that they actually have? Because there are a lot. The world is quite literally your oyster. And that might sound unrealistic or far-fetched, but it's real. It's real. I think I'm going to go find some articles on literacy so that we can talk about those. But this phone is going to die, so let me charge it for like 30 minutes and then we'll come back.